Let's go to the headline here. I have an article from Variety, January 23rd, 2024, by Joe Otterson. Netflix WWE strike deal to move Monday Night Raw to streamer beginning in 2025 for $500 million per year. Let's stop right there. A wrestling company is going to be paid $500 million a year for one of their shows to air somewhere. That's incredible.
One of them. And for 10 years, and some wise ass on Twitter said, well, but they say there's a clause they can get out after 5 years, so it's not really a $5 billion. Okay, $2.5 billion. It's now the question, I guess the thing is that they figure, first of all, because we talked about, well, they years ago, and Vince's big thing was we want to be back on network TV, and they got Fox. Now they've lost Fox, but at the same time, we said, well, would they want to be on streaming? Because, they're still not going to be as visible maybe as they've been on some type of regular television. But for $500 million a year for one of the shows, that's not even all of their rights fees. They could run Mighty Mouse cartoons and goddamn wouldn't have to lift another finger, wouldn't they?
Well, the other thing you got to remember, and I could see what I could find out about the actual numbers, but I believe the amount of homes right now subscribed to cable in the United States is somewhat close to, if not equal to, the amount of U.S. homes subscribed to Netflix.
Oh, well, and actually, that's a point I was going to make before I got sidetracked with they're switching their whole model, is that over 10 years and getting paid all that money anyway, by the time it's 11 years from now, I guess they're figuring everybody's going to be streaming this shit. So we'll be on equal footing with almost anybody else, network television or whatever. They're thinking ahead. Maybe by then, hopefully, I'm just quietly reading a book in a chair rather than having to stream every goddamn thing. But that's an unheard of amount of money that they're going to be taking in just to produce television that is watched by still, even though they're doing very well, what a fifth of the amount of people it was watching it 25 years ago when they weren't even in the same stratosphere. This is just insane. Once again, Tony Khan, whack. Like, fuck you. You spent your father's $100 million over the last 5 years. We're going to make $2.5 billion for one show in that same amount of time coming up.
And let's remind everyone, it has it here in this article, the rights to SmackDown were sold to NBC Universal and USA Network in a 5-year, $1.4 billion deal. NXT to the CW, apparently between 20 and 25 million a year for 5 years.
So that's 125 with the 1.4 and a 1.6. It's almost closing in on $7 billion.
Plus merch.
Plus merch, yeah. And trans is extra. So, I mean, that, again, it's a ridiculous amount of money. And, who could, I guess Vince saw this, but Vince has seen a lot of things and they didn't come to fruition, but he can say he saw this one. But again, it's a sign also that the new ownership, they've got everybody in place and bringing people back, which we'll talk about in a second. But they can go in and talk to these people and make these deals because they're so heavy now with UFC and WWE and the whole TKO thing and the Nick Khan, the Hollywood agents and the Ari Emanuels and these fucking wheeler dealers. This is Hollywood now. And the amount of money is ludicrous. But the one thing you read in that story quoted it as Monday Night Raw, but the actual original release telling us what was going on, didn't it just say WWE Raw? Because a few people picked up that they didn't say specifically Monday night. It could be any old night.
It would
And then
make
they wouldn't
sense,
have
I
to
would
worry
think, to
about
keep it on.
football.
I mean, if it's Netflix and they have there's no programming issues. You're not bumping into anything else. It's a streaming platform. I would keep them on Mondays, wouldn't you?
Well, how would that work in terms of they're going to air it live like they have been, right?
Right.
I would assume.
With I guess less commercials.
See, I've never watched the Netflix. I don't know what they do about that type of thing, but
Netflix has introduced commercials, but in some of their programs, I mean, something like this where they're paying all this money, I'm sure there'll be something, but it won't be the level of USA Network, I wouldn't think.
well, but also you said it's right there. It's archived. You can go back to it and you can start in the middle or whatever. So the way that they've now USA Network or whatever network, any of the WWE programs, whether it's SmackDown on Fox, Raw on USA, or whatever it's going to go into, blah, 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 they air the program live on that particular network. And then they put selected YouTube clips up. But those networks on demand services, if they have them, are behind. In other words, you can't go to Fox on demand the next day and watch that SmackDown. You got to wait a week or two. And
depends on the system. I don't know if that's universal everywhere.
I think it may be because here's the question I'm about to ask you, because this was a concern even, back in the day. If you can watch it anytime, if it's going to be rerun multiple times, for example, that takes the urgency away from seeing it live, or if you can see it immediately on demand, it takes the urgency away from seeing it live. They can't do anything about people's personal DVRs, just like they couldn't do anything about VCRs. But with the Netflix service, is there going to be, if you can watch it anytime after it happens, then is there going to be the urgency to watch that live and the attention paid to the numbers of its first airing when anybody can just hop in and start from then on out?
I think that's the one.
Am I asking this the right way?
I think it's a great question. I personally believe that it's very similar to TV in this way. Live is live. No matter what's archived or what you DVR or what's available, everything's available everywhere right away. But something live is still a thing that if you have an excited fan base, if it's programming that's rewarding to the fan base, if you have a lot of good things going on.
I like the way you worded that, by the way. If it's programming that's rewarding to the fan base.
If it's good and people have a reason to keep coming back and they want to keep seeing what's going to happen next, live, I think even if everything's instantly available, live is still the thing. Twitter, anything that happens on Twitter, everything's live. So like even that small percentage of the audience, no one's going to be like, I'm going to wait until after I get a chance to watch this. Right away, as soon as something happens, it's out there. You want to see it before you read about it.
Well, you may be right. We'll see what happens with it. But do they care at that point? Does Netflix have ratings? I'm sure there's all kinds of ways. The refrigerators are talking to the fucking stoves. I'm sure there's a way that they can measure exactly how many people are viewing a program. If they're paying that much money for it, they ought to be. But will there be emphasis on any ratings per se on Raw Netflix like there still will be on SmackDown on USA Network or whatever?
It's funny too. Netflix is the one that was doing that Vince McMahon docuseries, right?
I wonder if that got fucking 86'd as part of the deal.
It'll be interesting to see what happens there. This is a major move. I thought the two most likely candidates were Amazon and Netflix, just because I think this is what's happening. These guys have money to throw around. The way cable was a disruptor for the NFL and all sports, actually, that's right now what streaming is. There's a reason they're spending all this money to try to get football. Apple's doing it. I never thought Apple would really be involved in this. But it's all about streaming for the future. Because the kids today, from college down, they don't give a fuck about TV. They don't give a fuck about cable. They don't even know what broadcast is in a lot of cases. They have their phones. And mostly it's short form stuff on TikTok. And WWE has, I'm sure, a big social media plan with all this. But if you're going to watch something long form, Your kids aren't saying, hey, can we get cable? They're saying, hey, can I have the password for Netflix? Can I have the password for Disney Plus? That kind of thing. It's all about streaming for the future. And I think that's why Netflix spent this amount of money. It's an incredible amount of money. Think about the premium they're getting above the previous. What is it, like a 30% raise above the previous?
I think it's 33%.
I mean,
yeah.
It's incredible.
Well, and how much is it to subscribe to Netflix? Are they going to have to get, is it $5? They need 100 million new subscribers a year? Or is this just for the love of the game and the cachet of being able to throw around the WWE programming?
I think Netflix needs original programming. They need live programming. They need things that people are going to watch. It's almost amazing in a lot of cases that these platforms are so late to the dance with wrestling. That was one of the few things cable got right in the early years. Wrestling fans are a big audience. Wrestling has a big audience.
Well, I don't know if cable got it right in the early years or if they just figured it out because the fans were doing it on their own. When I was one of the tuned in with it smart fans as a teenager, that was the goddamn dream, to be able to get cable because it wasn't in most people's areas. And as soon as you were able to get it, if you were a wrestling fan, you got it for Georgia Championship Wrestling, for some of the other programs that may not have been on national cable, but when you got a cable system back in those days, you got, some stray out of town channels that would potentially have a different territory's wrestling. So wrestling was selling cable like it sold televisions in 1948. And now television has finally given wrestling all the love that it's been a love-hate relationship. Wrestling loved TV because it needed it for the past 75 years, and TV hated wrestling because most of the stations, most of the networks would begrudgingly put it on because people watched it, but it was only every once in a while you found one that really loved it. So now they're loving the WWE at least long time over this whole thing.
Jimmy asked about the price of Netflix. The standard subscription with ads is $6.99 a month. Standard without ads is $15.49 a month. Premium is $22.99. Unlimited ad-free viewing, and you can use up to 4 different devices simultaneously, with the capability to download content onto 6 devices.
What the?
So you could use 4 at the same time, but download onto 6.
Who's going to watch 4 things at the exact same time?
Well, maybe you want to walk from room to room and, mingle, say hello to everyone.
That wouldn't take me long, but anyway.
It's coming out. Look, Netflix is on every TV all of a sudden.
What the hell has happened? I mean, be like Vince going into the studio. The cake is in the oven. Instantly, it all pops up to Netflix